He might join us back. It's all yours.
Yeah, so welcome everybody to this September PowerAddicts Hangout on Teams, of all places. And I think the first thing we should do is to bask in the momentous news that the Smile that's launched had the Power Platform Inspire the other year. And when I say launched, I mean for most people, they weren't really aware of it until Samit burst onto the scene, is now an MVP, and all our lives have been enriched by his humility and his honesty and his unflinching passion for the fact that if he can do it, anybody can do it. And like what you may not know about Samit, and it was one thing that like he never made clear to anybody, that when he was on stage with Satya last year at Inspire, he was still studying for his high school qualifications. So he managed to do all that amazing stuff. And like, you know, the guy's just the most humble man I've ever met. So like huge props to Samit. And I think it's going to be the start of something truly and, you know, incredible, because like, you know, if he can't be an MVP, then no one can, you know, it's like, as far as I'm concerned. So about bloody time.
Congratulations, Samit.
Congratulations, Samit. So with us tonight, we have.
And if you want, you can take a Jaeger shot for him as well.
Yeah, you can take lots of Jaeger shots. Yeah, if you want to really toast the man. So with us tonight, we have the amazing Kendrick, aka Dr. No, the governance genius behind Alan on our last show from Schlumberger. What those guys are preparing for can only be described as absolutely groundbreaking and monumental in terms of the scope of what they're planning, and it's Kendrick's an enviable task to weave the governance web around a huge amount of creativity that's happening at Schlumberger, and the eyes of the world are watching. So it's going to be awesome. And Clarissa from Silver Sands, who has sprung onto the scene, and she's got a really interesting backstory, but I'll let Clarissa tell you that because she's up first. So Clarissa, take it away. Tell us a bit about yourself and how you came to the Power Platform, and how that worked.
Well, as Keith said, I come from a rather odd background into the Power Platform. If you talked to me 6 months ago, I would have told you that Office 365, that's probably just Word, PowerPoint, and Excel, right? And I was so wrong, of course, as everyone here knows. So I actually, my introduction to programming and development was during my university course. I did a physics degree, and halfway through they introduced us to programming in a language called C, which, if anyone recognizes the name, they probably will know that C was really prominent back in probably the 90s, and then got replaced almost by C++ and C#. So this was, really old school coding that they were teaching us. We did a lot of memory allocation, and it was painful. But that really caught my attention and caught my imagination, because previous to that point, it always seemed like software and programming was this kind of magical black box that someone extremely clever in some wizardry tower somewhere created these things, and there was no way that someone like me would be able to make something. So it really opened my eyes, but I guess because of the person I am, I didn't feel confident in then pursuing that directly as a career. So then I managed to, I did end up in software, but I was a project manager and team leader. And then eventually I kind of got to a point where I was thinking, you know what, I think that I could do this. And I was asking my guides, like, can you do this? Can you get this done? And I was helping them to try and figure out how to do the solutions and stuff. And I thought, you know what, I think I should give this a shot. And then I saw this opportunity at Silver Sands to start making apps and making software. And it was with the Power Platform, which was absolutely mind-blowing for me when I first started getting into it, because suddenly it was something that kind of gave me a helping hand and gave me that confidence to be able to make applications for customers, not just hobbying at home and worrying about whether I was doing it right or wrong. Just having that immediate feedback that you get with Power Apps, it was really freeing and really quite an incredible turnaround in my own mental state, you know, with programming. So that's kind of where I come from. I had to learn things like SharePoint from scratch. I had no idea that SharePoint was even a thing before 5 months ago. And yeah, I've kind of just fallen in love with, in particular, Canvas apps. I've fallen in love with because I've always loved UI elements and designing like that. And it really just, it's so good to just have a WYSIWYG editor where you can just put stuff where you want it. You've got that immediate feedback of, you know, you put something in, you put in some code, and it just runs immediately. You don't have to wait for stuff to compile. You just press that play button and you're there. And that is, you know, it's just such a powerful tool. And coming from where I have come from, you know, struggling with C and getting all these, you know, system bus errors and just being like, oh no, what's going on? Going to something that is so intuitive, it was just a really, really amazing step forward. And I'm obviously very grateful to my company for giving me a shot, because it was a little bit of a stab in the dark for them, I think, because obviously I came with zero experience in the platform. But yeah, I'm just so excited, even on like a daily basis, just to see what the community is doing. Like, you know, in contact with some amazing people all around the world. Obviously, a lot of them are in this call on the bottom of the screen there. And it's just fantastic to have that kind of collaborative atmosphere, and not just being able to, you know, have a tool that as a team you could work on something collaboratively, but the whole community just has that collaborative atmosphere and ideas. And I think that, yeah, it's just amazing to see where this is going and how we can all progress each other forward in a way.
I think it's really interesting that, like, you know, you start off with C and you're on a physics degree, and you're sitting there thinking that, like, exactly how Samit talks, exactly how Martin Lee talks, exactly how a lot of the citizen developers talk, with no, you know, formal training. They turn around and they say, this thing has got to be too hard because it seems it on the surface. And so you're in that physics, like, you know, and to us that physics world is kind of like, if you're on a physics degree, you're already pretty damn clever, right? That's kind of like a given, you know. But to hear that sort of like that insecurity, I think that's something that rings true with every one of us. But I just think it's fascinating that you've come about it where you could have gone down this sort of very traditional programming route from the start, but actually you've come over to this platform because you feel like you can get more done, and I think that's really interesting. And it makes me wonder what will be next on the Clarissa story. You've got a few. So you've been doing a lot on social media and stuff. Was it right? Am I right in thinking you've got some demo sort of thing that you were going to show, or am I making that up?
I do have something. As I was saying to some of the guys before the call, I did what I always do with Power Apps is I was making something and then I go, oh, that's shiny, I'll add that in. Or, oh, I'll just spruce that up a bit. Oh, and I'll make that really cool. And then I completely ran out of time to finish everything off.
That's called the API guy. That's that guy. Like he loves doing that kind of thing. It's like, that's why he got his nickname from. It was like he was supposed to be the button guy, and he ended up being the API guy.
Yep.
So
you always want to do more. Yeah,
definitely. So forgive me if it's a little rough around the edges, but yeah, we can have a look at this.
Yeah.
So this is something that I there we go. Let's just share my screen. So this is something that I was working on for my blog series that I'm running, which is a series for introducing people to Power Apps. Especially because of my programming background, I found that there's a lot of stuff that I learned from programming that has been really, really helpful. And of course, Power Apps is supposed to be low code, no code solution. But as soon as you start to put even just the slightest bit of code in, that can be really intimidating for people who have no programming background. So my blog series is to try and provide people with the basics of programming knowledge so that then they can hopefully get a similar head start in Power Apps that I did. So that's the whole idea behind this. So this one is all about logic functions. And I don't know if you guys have seen on Twitter, I've been talking to Hiro-san at Mofu Mofu Dance about drag and drop in Power Apps, and I couldn't resist. I had to make the ice cream truck travel along the road.
Yeah, there's a black hole that you can disappear into. The world of Hiro.
Yeah, he is insane. I absolutely love seeing what he comes up with. So apologies, some of the menus are a little bit janky because I've been trying with animated menus and stuff, but hopefully it, once I get it all ironed out, it will look really shiny and slick is the idea. So the idea here is you go through and you start adding in requests. So this is helping a person go from a sentence in English to a statement in code, basically. So if we say that our friend Sam would like to have a Magnum, our friend Mary, and you can possibly tell what fandoms I'm into, would like a strawberry cornetto, if I can spell it. And our friend Pippin would like anything with white chocolate because he has a bit of a sweet tooth. Cool. So these are our, statements in English that our friends might say to us if we've got an ice cream van coming along the road and we want to buy them some ice creams. So the next thing that we need to do is we need to figure out how to turn this English sentence into something that the computer can understand. So we need to figure out what needs to happen for Sam to be happy. So we have a look at our options here. So we've got 3 different options for what properties our ice creams can have. So he's asked for a Magnum. So we know that the brand has to be equal to Magnum. And then we can see that it's generated some like example code for us. So this is the condition that we would need to type in order to change Sam's state from either neutral to happy or neutral to sad if we've given him the wrong ice cream. So we generate that condition, and then we see that condition in our condition list. Now, if we go to the next person, we're actually in a situation here where we've got 2 different things that Mary wants. So he wants the brand to be equal to Cornetto, which I will spell right one day. But he also wants the flavor to be equal to strawberry, because if we just say, check whether the brand is equal to Cornetto, we could buy him a mint one And the system would think that Mary would be happy, but in reality he won't be. So how do we handle these complex conditions? The way that we do it is via the logic statements and or. So what and does is it means that statement A plus, if you have statement A and statement B, then that means statement A has to be true, and at the same time, statement B has to be true as well. So if we want to put in Mary's request into something that the computer can understand, we have to say brand is equal to cornetto and flavor is equal to strawberry. And down here we can see that it's generating us some example code for what we can put into our conditions later on. So we'll generate that condition and we'll see that's been added to the list. Perfect. And then for Pippin, I happen to know, because I've cheated and made the list myself, that there are 2 things in the ice cream van that are white chocolate. There's a white chocolate Magnum, and there's also the new white chocolate and cookies Magnum. So in this instance, we can't use and, because either he's going to have the white chocolate Magnum or he's going to have the white chocolate and cookies Magnum. I guess we could buy him both and he'll probably eat them both because, of course, being a hobbit, he is going to eat of everything we buy him. But in order to make sure that we check whether the ice cream that we've got is the correct one for him, we have to use or. So or does what it says on the tin. It's statement A or statement B. So if statement A is true, then the result will be true. If statement B is true, but A is false, the statement will still be true. And this generates out our statement for us down here. So now we've got, let's see, did I add it? I did not. I spent way too long playing around with timers. I just wanted to make it look pretty. There we go. So now we're at the stage where we can actually have a look at buying some ice creams. So we can check our first one, the Magnum. Will this please Mr. Sam? So we know that Sam's condition is that the brand of the selected ice cream should be Magnum. So we check, is the brand equal to Magnum? Yes, it is. Excellent. So we should be able to give him the ice cream and hopefully make him happy. If I fix that just before, no, there we go. Okay, I was trying to get their faces to be happy literally 10 minutes before the call because I got too carried away. But if we were to, for example, select a vanilla cornetto, then we'll see here we've got brand is equal to cornetto, brand equals cornetto, which we can cross-reference against our condition, and we can see that if we did buy Sam that one, then he would be sad because we hadn't followed his instructions. So that's just a little kind of introduction for people. They can play around with how they can start to construct logic statements. They can start playing around with seeing, well, will the person be happy in this scenario or in this scenario? And yeah, just give them that introductory flavor to logic functions. So hopefully that was interesting for you guys. Are there any questions?
No, I mean, there's no questions as such, but yeah, everybody's sharing how their journey, like you shared your journey, how you started, everyone's sharing how they kind of ended up with PowerAddicts. But yeah, I just wanted to say this app looks really cool, and I think it's a great way to kind of learn the basic, because these are the kind of questions I get when I also see somebody in my company getting excited about using PowerAddicts and Flow, and then they're like, okay, how do I do this? Like they know that it's like an if else kind of a thing, but they don't know how to actually use it in Power Apps. So this is like a
Yeah.
great app to start off with.
We always forget, I think, us the technologists, as we agreed this once before, I think, that an expert is the first person to forget what beginner looks like, you know. And it's kind of like, if we don't go back and address, you know, it's like, oh, it's just an if statement. What's that? Like, you know, it's bread and butter, isn't it?
Yeah.
You know, it's an if statement.
Yeah.
But actually, like, to people who are potentially seeing this and seeing all the excitement around it in a business and wanting to get onto it, there's that whole bit that you talked about at the beginning, being on, you know, on a physics degree and seeing the C thing. There's that feeling, there's that barrier to entry, and I think this is a really slick way of having, like, it, you know, my kids are always kind of like having to do multiple tests, and they kind of do this thing by rinse and repeat. You know, they're just constantly doing addition and number bonds and all that kind of stuff. And this kind of thing is just absolutely spectacular when it comes to dropping this into a business, and saying, look, if you want to practice your if statements and your conditional statements, if you want to do like little sort of, oh, what were you stuck on? Right, this bit, like, you know, this is the kind of that, taking that language, and it's kind of like what Power BI does with that whole question thing, and it's really impressive. Are we going to see it in the App Store and in the community gallery on Power Apps?
Well, I might add it in. I've still got a couple of bits and pieces to do on it, and then I was going to write my blog article for it, following on from my series, and potentially do a video of going through it. But
you should do.
Yeah,
for sure.
Nervous to show my face.
I did have one. I have one question. I think there's another question inside of the chat. But my question was, I noticed that when we were given the or statements, so you're giving them if it's right. What if they go in with something they're completely off? Where here in the middle, it can be or and. Is that just giving them the option, or is there any way that you would say that you may not have selected the correct operator?
What I was trying to make it, or the way that I was trying to make it work, was a bit more, you know, kind of learning by trying things out and experimenting. So it was kind of going to be a case of, if they do select an and maybe they wanted to select an or, then when they go into the next screen and test out the results of what they've bought, sorry, my menus are going crazy now, then they'll see they'll see that something's gone wrong. And then the idea is that then they'll go back to this screen and think, well, okay, so why did that particular one not work? So it's supposed to be more of a kind of a trigger to help people gain the true understanding behind it, rather than just going, okay, I've memorized that in this case I need to do and, or in this case I need to do or. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that makes sense. Definitely makes sense. It's that second screen where you kind of see if your thought process was right or were you off, and if you're off, you go back in, you change it, go back in and make sure that it fits the condition. So yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah,
makes sense. So there is one question, and the question was, have you embedded this app anywhere like SharePoint or even PowerPoint?
I haven't. No, I have before embedded a Canvas app into SharePoint, and it's super easy to do. I haven't tried into PowerPoint yet. That might be something that I try after the call.
Ideas.
You know why this is really great? This reminds me of in high school when they tried to teach us JavaScript, they had us make turtle programs.
Oh yeah.
And this provides that same level of interactivity where you're actually engaged with the programming. You're not just typing out programming.
Yeah, because it can be easy for learning programming to be dull. But I don't think that it should be, because it's actually really interesting and exciting and interactive. And so if you can kind of get that teaching across in a way that's interesting, exciting, and interactive, then you're just reflecting the actual concept that you're teaching underneath. So hopefully this kind of fits that bill, as it were.
Well, I especially enjoy your menus. A bit of a UI nerd. Like the menus are nice. I think the color scheme is really cool. Yeah, there's a few people that I've worked with in the past, and they like. I mean, if you saw Ellen last month, he was talking about color schemes, and I'm looking at all this stuff all together. I'm like, yeah, she followed someone's suggestions, and it looks really, really good. So kudos on that.
Thank you. At work, I'm definitely the person who, even if the other guys in the team have been working on the app, they'll always pass it to me and say, please make it pretty. And then I get really excited because I love that bit.
Did you take the colours deliberately from the ice cream on top of the truck?
I did indeed. Yep. Well spotted, eagle eye, Mr. Keith there.
Yeah, that's a nice touch. Very clever.
If you notice, the icons are also circular to match the ice cream scoops.
Yeah, I'm loving it. I'm loving it. What you need is kind of like a timer that kind of animates in the beginning with like the ice cream scoops building up on top of the cone. That would be cool. But that's just, you know, but now this is another shiny thing that you've got to go off and do.
Yeah, I know, right?
Eat into your day.
Maybe this app will get onto the community gallery in like 5 years or so when I've added all of the shiny things.
Absolutely. So we got I actually wanted to give a couple of shout outs while we're on to a couple of conferences just to make everyone aware that they're up and coming, because there's a whole bunch of kind of like Power Platform stuff starting. So we've got Sweden in a couple of weeks, which is going to be really super exciting. There's a lot of stuff going on over there. There is the Thrive conference over in Slovenia, which by all accounts, according to our good friend Penny Coventry, is the nicest conference to go to, as in the most pleasant. So that one's going to be interesting. And preparations are massively underway for Scotland, which I understand is next to epic. And seeing that they've had, I believe the word ridiculous has been mentioned, number of submissions for the 9 tracks that they've got going on for the free Dynamic Saturday event that's going on up there. And then I believe Orlando's coming up. Is that right? A couple of you guys, I think, is going down there to do Dynamics community in Orlando, and there's a whole bunch of world tours things checking out. So jump on the Twitter sphere and on Dynamics communities and check out those great events. We just had the London one, super awesome, some really interesting stuff there. In fact, the most interesting thing I saw, and I suggest you check out the demo from Jess, who's on Twitter, and she basically had this amazing thing. I can only describe it, and all I shall say is that it was a series of buttons triggering off the next button. But what she'd actually done is written that as the debug, and she'd had arrows pointing from one button to another with the conditionals. So she had this kind of like all of her code hidden in the background on these buttons that triggered one another. But for a governance piece, it showed the flow of the code and the flow of the data through the system. So it was really interesting to see. I've got to say, it was the highlight of the conference, and it wasn't even the topic of her talk, but it sure bloody well was afterwards. So yeah, fascinating stuff. And up next we've got Kendrick. I will let Geetha take it away with Kendrick and governance and all the rest of it, and we shall see what happens with Dr. No.
Thank you, Keith. So I'll try to not make everybody go to sleep here with what we're going to be talking about. It's not exactly the most exciting topic, right? But it is, essential, right, for us to actually have. So can you see this okay now, Keith?
Yep, all good.
All right, perfect. So, I generally tend to think of those of you who've met me and know me now, right? I have sort of interesting takes and spins on a lot of these things, right? So I look at things from usually a slightly different perspective. I always try to, my Twitter handle is AKA Dr. No, but as Keith pointed out to me, right, I might need to change that to Dr. AKA No Light, right, or something like that, right. So a little bit about myself and who I am. So my name is Kenrick Aguilar, and I work for Schlumberger. Right, we are the world's largest oil and gas services company. We are in 84 countries, and we have a whole lot of people working for us. So currently, I looked at the tenant this morning. We have 102,750 Office 365 licenses, of which my team of, get ready for the number, 6 manage all of that for everyone.
That's a lot.
Yeah, man, like you sound like you're kind of like in a lap of luxury there.
Right.
He says no.
Anyone would say
Well,
you're under-resourced.
I'm selling myself short here, Keith. I mean, I should have said 7 because I didn't include myself. Right.
There you go.
Right. So a little bit more about the environment, right? So here's a quick kind of snapshot of like June 2019, right? So we had at the time, if you look at this, we had 5,700 power apps, right? And almost 7,000 flows, right? If we come to this month, right?
What?
You'll see
Wow. That's like exponentially increasing like month to month.
Okay, so this is what we're dealing with over here, right? And it's not slowing down whatsoever, mainly in part to, if you look down on the bottom left there, and I know I kind of intentionally didn't hide the names. If you see who our #1 app maker is down there, right, with 71, it's Alan Chai.
Yeah, but doing some on the fly maths, that's a tiny fraction. Like, although Alan's like made 71 apps, that's not unexpected for someone like Alan.
Right.
But that you've got people there who are damn close. And if you've got 7,000 and Alan's only got 71, you've got a lot of app makers.
Yes.
Like a lot.
2,000 almost.
Yeah.
Yes. We have
insane.
a metric blank ton of app loaders, of app makers, right? So this is part of the challenge that we're dealing with, right? I mean, it's like, again, how do you enforce and put in governance without really trying to slow down or stifle the creation, right, of the user community, right, and affecting the business. So one of the things that we also have now is we have a very large and thriving Power Apps community inside of Yammer, right? So this is our snapshot over the last 12 months, and you can see, right, that the activity between, say, April, May, June, July, right, has really picked up. I don't have the numbers for August yet, right, but judging by what I've been seeing in the tenant, right, it's really been picking up, especially after the recent announcements that we've had around licensing and all of those things. So I'll talk about some more of that in a little bit. Right. One of the things that we really encourage the community to do is not only to, help each other, right, but really, and when I say help each other, right, I mean reach out to folks outside of Schlumberger, but to really help each other internally as well. So more often than not, you'll see folks that are asking questions inside of Yammer and getting them answered from the internal community within sometimes 2 to 5 minutes. Right?
Wow.
People are just, responding and really embracing the technology, right, internally for us. So this is kind of my take on the things, right? So, if anybody of you have ever, wondered like which way you should go, right? Do you take the big bang approach, or do you sort of really go and look for the low-hanging fruit, right? So I used to watch The Big Bang Theory, so I thought the image was cute. That's why it's there, Keith. Okay, right. So if you look at the tree for a second, right? On the tree, you can see that I've got like OneDrive and SharePoint, Outlook / Exchange. Those things are at the bottom, right? So those things are really low-hanging fruit that you can go out and go after and get really, really easily, But if you look at that and you see that purple fruit all the way up there at the top, right? That's CDS, right? And CDS, right? As much as I love it and I really want everybody to embrace it, it requires licensing, right? And sometimes a lot more planning, right? Like we have the API guy on the phone, right? And one of the things that we really strive and try to tell the user community that if you're going for the low-hanging fruit, that's great. But if you're looking to build an enterprise level app within PowerApps, right? Then like maybe let's look at an API first strategy and let's use PowerApps as the front end for that, right? And hook this into all of our other APIs. Let's plug Power Apps into SAP. Let's plug it into our finance systems. Let's plug it into our expense systems. Let's plug it into our HSC systems. Let's do all of that, right? Like right now, Keith, we're looking at something internally to possibly use Power Apps for global employee recognition, right? So we're looking at things like that, right? Again, it's a little bit of a challenge, right? Where do you go when you maybe have, say, a low-hanging fruit item that turns into a viral app and then now needs to be escalated into something along the lines of CDS, right?
Yep.
And you've got 10,000 users on this, right? At, maybe, what is it now? $7 a user, I think, right? On the per app model.
Yeah.
So 7,000, right? $7 times 10, that's $70,000 a user. I mean, a month. That's a lot of money, right? So not every enterprise is ready for something like that, especially, given if you're a small enterprise or even a large enterprise such as Schlumberger, right? We can't necessarily justify spending $70,000 a month on an application, right? Just so that it can use CDS. So
Yep.
again, how do we go through and manage the variables that we have, right? So the first of this in governing all of that for us is how do we deal with the licensing aspect of it all? And today, while we really want to embrace and encourage folks to use CDS, right? We have taken a bit of a step back and we've looked at it and we said, okay, well, what are the users building today? Like, what are they really, really doing? Right. And a lot of them are honestly kind of exploring, but we have some of them who are also building like these rather large applications. I mean, we have one right now with 10,000, right at 10,000, just about 9,800 monthly active users in that one particular Power App. Right. But they're all doing everything today on top of SharePoint Online and, interestingly enough, SQL Server as the backend. Right. So great, it works fine, it's very responsive, and the users seem to love it, right? But that's an example of one of the viral apps, right, that we have that essentially should probably go into CDS and then be converted over into something along the lines of a pro development model where you start talking about and using a center of excellence. And I'll talk about that some more in a little later, right? As I also mentioned, right, you may want to consider when you're building these applications to really look at an API first mentality. Because as much as I love Power Apps, right, and I'm really, really do, and I'm very pro Power Apps, it may come a time where Power Apps may not suit your needs, right? Or you may decide to go a different route, right? And if you have the APIs developed, right, then it may be, right, still going to be some work, but it may be a lot easier for you to switch that interface, right, into Power Apps or maybe out of Power Apps, right? And then another thing, right, so this one really caught me kind of off guard, right, it's the DLP and the gateway, right? How do you get security to approve for an organization, say of our size, right, to a gateway that essentially exposes something from a cloud service and allows you to gain access to data inside of your corporate intranet, right, your corporate network, right? And what do you do to manage all of these gateway installs? And the reason why I say that, right, why management of the gateway is key and that you need to really get ahead of it, right, if Lad were here, he would talk about how, and Lad's one of my coworkers, right? And I'll talk about him again some more in a little bit. But Lad would talk about how he used to be Mr. Shadow IT, right? And all of the things that he used to do in the background in terms of trying to get stuff done for the business. So I'm all for that, but at the same time, part of my job is to prevent shadow IT. So when we were setting up the environments and going through and tracking everything, again, Schlumberger is a large organization. So when we flipped the switch for PowerAddicts, right, we flipped the switch and we're like, okay, let's just turn this on and see kind of what happens. We weren't expecting for me to have now 62 gateways and 60 of those are which are unmanaged, right? So we have a mess load of gateways out there. Thankfully, the DLP policies are keeping them in check, right? So we've set up the DLPs to manage all of the environments that we have. We're also cleaning up the environments. So when I say get ahead of it, I'm not only talking about just the gateways themselves, but also get ahead and plan ahead of the entire rollout, right? Trust me, you're going to be thanking me later and saying, you know, that was some really good planning that we did, right? When we rolled this out, it was over a year and a half ago, and it was one of those you don't know what you don't know kinds of things, right? And now the platform has grown, and you know, Microsoft has taken these enormous steps, mainly, I would say, in part to, you know, people like us that are on this call today, right? We've given them an immense amount of feedback, right? And they've taken that and rolled that into the product, right? So kind of hats off to them for listening to a lot of what the feedback that we've given to them. On the flow side of things, right? I've also noticed, as you saw, right, we've had tremendous growth in flow. And one of the interesting things for us is that the business is now claiming that a lot of their flows are, you know, quote unquote, business critical. Right? Now there are a few where they've gone in and, you know, done some really interesting things with flows. Like, you know, I keep using this example over and over when I give these talks about this one set of individuals, these set of individuals within the finance hub here at Schlumberger that was able to repurpose an entire person because they automated everything that he did, right, on a daily basis with Microsoft Flow, right? The issue that they had there was now that once they did it, and the person, of course, didn't lose their job, just FYI, when I say repurpose, okay? Now they were starting to hit issues where they needed, you know, faster runs or more runs and whatnot, right? Because the business was really starting to use this workflow. So thankfully, Microsoft has now added, you know, an ability to have more capacity on a per flow model, right? But we have also run into some interesting things about, you know, where users are asking for service accounts, or we call them role accounts internally, and wanting to assign those to the flows, right? So now we've had to come up with ways to license those as well, right? So in addition to normal user accounts, we now also have to start licensing service accounts along with our governance and think about ways to do that. Inside of PowerAddicts, we've done similar things with the environments, right? Our environments are now tied to service accounts or role accounts, right? So all of the creation of those are owned, right, by those service accounts. If the application is going to be, say, a business critical or more business centric, right, then if Keith or Gita or someone, Clarissa, anyone is actually building an application and it goes viral, right? And viral for us right now, we're tossing around the idea of maybe upping the number. Viral is more than 50 active users a month. Viral will maybe go to 100 or so, possibly, right? But let's say you have 50 active users for now, right? We'll contact you, right? And say, hey, Clarissa, we noticed that your app is really picking up steam. Would you like to transfer your app, the ownership of your app, and have us take over for you, right? Would you like for us to, you know, pull this into one of the center of excellence, right? So there's some things that we're trying to do and trying to be proactive with so that the users don't have to maybe carry the burden of maintaining their own apps, right? Or creating innovation when they think that innovation is completely done with their one single app, right? Or maybe they have an app that has a really great idea, but it's very similar to something else. We're looking at taking those applications and combining them into maybe a single app, right? Or linking them together, right? The DLP policies are something that's been really interesting. And for us internally now security is involved. So security wants to know how we are determining what gets into the business data side and what goes into non-business. So we have been diligently working for the past 3 weeks to develop and write this nice internal white paper and publish this new standard on how to get non-business data into the business data section in the DLP policy, right? So for things, for example, DocuSign, HR would like to use DocuSign today, right? For documents that are stored inside of SharePoint libraries, but they're in different business categories. So our security team has to get the one sign off, right? They have to sign off with the business, or sorry, let me rephrase that. The business needs to contact security. Security will direct them to say, okay, well, here's the things that I need. And once we get security sign off, right, they contact our team and then we go in and we can add it in as a quote unquote verified application, right? Certified application. We kind of inherently, for good or bad, trust anything that's made by Microsoft, right? So some folks kind of argued with us on that, right? I think thankfully security and I were on the same page and we won that battle, right? But there were little things like Microsoft Forms Pro. They started asking, well, are the users licensed for that? And that's a whole nother discussion, right? So I was supposed to take that Triton approach off of there because it's not 3, it's supposed to be 4. So I should have called it the fork approach or something, right, Keith? So internally for us, we really like to work together. So our center of excellence really comprises for us internally of these 4 pillars, right? We have IT operations, which is where I am. We have IT development, which is where Lad Lear, I spoke about him earlier. We have the business, who is Alan Chai, right? So Alan Chai represents the business side of everything in IT. And then we have our partner, we have Microsoft. And that all comes together internally for us to form our center of excellence. So through that, right, and through those 4 pillars, we sort of all go through and get on the same page, for lack of a better term, right, and push the same message out to the user. So what we found is that the users will sometimes circumvent, even though they know who to go to, right, governance-wise, because we've been sort of pushing this message out. They know who to go to, but they will, well, I don't want to talk to IT. I'm going to find somebody inside of Microsoft and talk to them directly. So Microsoft, thankfully, has been on the same page with us. So Microsoft directs them back to us, right? Or they deliver the exact same message as us, right? Because they're in our meetings, they are aware of our policies, they're aware of what we're actually doing, right? So I know I've been kind of going and talking a lot and going really, really like deep into this. And I wanted this to be more of a discussion for myself because I figured folks would definitely have questions about it. So here's my Q&A section.
Kendrick, man, they're like it's fascinating, dude. Like, I mean, you got companies with 0 apps out there. Like the vast majority of companies have got 0. And we were at a World Tour user group the other day, and there's people coming and they're talking about, I want to know more about Power BI apps. And we're like, no, those Power Apps is something else that's not that. So you talking about 7,000 apps and them talking about 0 apps. I think what's great is that just seeing that this explosion in growth and what you actually have to be prepared for, and quoting Andrew Welsh, you need to talk about enterprise planning now. Like you cannot you cannot start day one without talking about it. Yes, you can do it in parallel, or you can on day two you can be building apps, but on day one you need to put some guards in from day one. And I think, yeah, some of us have been very lucky to be in businesses where the users have been, let's, for want of a better word, good and well behaved. But I'm sure out there'll be a couple who aren't. And what you're showing is that, wow, how the hell can you police that many people?
I mean, we've got some interesting people within the organization, right, Keith? Right. We have Schlumberger, I like to tell folks, is a company of engineers, and everybody thinks there's an engineer. They're an engineer. As soon as you join the company, you're automatically an engineer, right? And what a lot of folks tend to start doing is they start having that engineering mentality of tinkering with, and let me try this, let me try that, right? So they'll go in and, oh my God, what is this thing I can do? I can do an HTTP call inside of PowerApps. What can I get that with, right? So we had someone who was like trying to hack his own phone, right, with doing HTTP calls and sending malicious code, right, to his own phone, right, because he thought that he was actually, trying to break into PowerApps, right, and showing that PowerApps was vulnerable, right. But the DLP policy prevented all of that stuff, and only person that he was hacking was himself.
That's hilarious.
Love it.
By the way,
Love it.
I just saw Lad has also joined us, so feel free to comment, Lad, if you want to add anything.
Is he on mute?
Yeah, he's not normally quiet.
This is Nick. I've got a question.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I think the whole Power App COE tool is awesome for the proactive mode. How did you guys approach kind of the reactive mode? Like you mentioned security needed to know about for some of the DLP stuff. How do users even, because so much of this stuff is new, so it's like, I'm thinking of our IT ticket system. The tickets don't even, like, the little options in the drop downs don't even exist to request some of this stuff, So how did the users even get the information to you in IT to be able to say, like, hey, this is what we need and this is where we're getting roadblocked?
So that's a very interesting and a very unique question, right? And actually, on the phone, I'm not going to put her on the spot and ask her to answer this, but I see Gina, who is on my team, actually is helping us with that today, right? So she came into the team in August, and one of the great things about having someone join your team from outside the organization, right? I mean, when I say outside of the organization, outside the team, right? She's been a part of Schlumberger for several years. Gina immediately came in and said, hey, Ken and Nicholas, the question she asked was almost exactly what you said, right? How do users know how to get support or get help for this, right? And so, the team looked around and whatnot, and everybody pointed at guess who? They all pointed at me, right? And said, well, he knows, right? So that's the problem, right? Is that one person knows, but not everybody does. So what Gina has so graciously been doing is building decision trees and whatnot for the help desk and educating and training the help desk, right, on how to, right, get information for Power Apps and Flow. Not only has she been doing that for us, right, and this is a pretty arduous task, right? She's proactively been going out to the Power Apps internal community and looking at what the users are asking and building workflows and decision trees around those things as well, and then communicating those things to the help desk. So we're slowly building this internal knowledge base about it all. I mean, honestly, in complete transparency, Nicholas, which I pretty much always am, right? We struggle, right? We struggle sometimes with on the support side of things, right? And it's mainly because the platform changes so much so quickly, right? We were just getting our head around the entire licensing model when all of a sudden Microsoft threw this awesome curveball a few days back, right? And I spent the majority of the morning this morning talking to my team, right, specifically Gina, about the new licensing model and how we were going to use that, right, when we're governing the platform now, right? So back to Keith's comment, right? A lot of this really all falls back to planning, right? And not trying to do it all by yourself. You have to get all of the pillars involved, right? It was very difficult when we were trying to do this only in operations. Now that we are doing this in operations, the business is on board, Microsoft as our partner is on board, and the development teams are all on board. Now you have a true, right, synergy of sorts, right? And things are flowing much, much better. I hope that answers your question.
Sure does. Thanks so much, man.
Yeah, you're welcome.
So I have a question. I think this is kind of the chicken or the egg conversation, and it happens often when you talk to companies that are new to Power Apps or to the Power Platform. Suggestion-wise, which way would you go? Would you suggest creating governance first before opening up the application, or open the application up to a pilot group? I mean, because it's always the question, and everyone you kind of talk to, they have a different stance on it. So how do you feel about that? Which way would you suggest?
So that's a very interesting question, Antoine. And honestly, I believe that a lot of it all sort of circles your culture, right, of your company, right? So if you look at us, for example, right, had I had to do this all over again, right, then absolutely a pilot group of sorts would have probably been a better idea, right? Where we could have gone out, did some discovery, made a whole bunch of mistakes, figured out how to lock a lot of things down, right? Instead, we opened Power Apps up to 100,000 users, right? And then went into extreme reactive mode of fixing the tenant, locking the tenant down, figuring all these things out, right? Now, I say that, right? But it did take us, right, 1 full year before we actually flipped on all of the Power Apps licenses, right? So before we rolled out, we started with SharePoint. Sorry, let me back that up. We actually started with Yammer, then we went to SharePoint, and then we started rolling out all the other workloads, right? So Schlumberger does some things like, just like when we say go, right? We plan, and then we say go. In 1 month, right? We migrated 40,000 Exchange mailboxes in 1 month, right? It was like that kind of thing. And the guys were like in reactive states and working tickets and doing all of these things. So it was kind of the same thing with Power Apps, right? We planned, at least we thought we planned, right? And then when we went, we're like, oh, well, none of those plans worked. None. It's all gone out the window.
Hey, if I can make a quick comment, this is Lad, by the way. I finally got my mic to work, so sorry about that earlier. But on the flip side, by unlocking it all and going into React mode, to Ken's comment about where a company of engineers, the innovation was just amazing, right?
Staggering.
To see people grab it, go after it, the hunger. It was such a measure of the hunger for digital across the company that on the flip side, it was brutal to deal with it on the IT infrastructure side, but to see the innovation and the hunger from the company, and us going through multiple hackathons with it and just seeing the growth, that was amazing, right? It was amazing. It's kind of like, would you go through the birth of your first child again? I mean, it was painful, right? You didn't sleep a whole lot, but look at what you got now after you're 2 years old or whatever, right? So I would say that. And now, we've got a COE to his point. We got a software side, we got the governance side, we have the community outreach side. So now we actually have some structure, and we got some really amazing apps in the backlog. So
before we wrap up, I got a question. Like, so you're in the front of the community here, right? So, and everyone wants this to happen. So what Lad's just said is the bit that business desperately needs. They want to be more productive. They want more. They want this thing, right? And you've got the sensible head sitting there with Kendrick going, actually, we could really do with planning this thing out. So if we the community, like, because basically the Center of Excellence, you could have built that. There's nothing there to stop you from building that because it's built on the Power Platform. So ergo, someone could build that. What tools would you welcome from the community? What would you like to see? Like, if someone starts building stuff, just some ideas out there that they could contribute to be potentially another bit of the armor for the COE. Is there anything you'd like to see that you wish you had in your toolkit when you were going out to war the first time?
Well, I think a lot of what we're missing right now is analytics, right? I mean, I've been trying to get data out of our tenant for quite some time, different methods, and it's a bit of a struggle. It's a bit of a challenge, right? We've definitely got some issues there about trying to report and actually show value, right? Because that's what ultimately, when I'm talking about the analytics, Keith, that's really what I want to do with it, right? I want to be able to go to, the execs, take this up to a C-level or someone and say, hey, listen, right? These are the apps that the users are creating. This is what type of usage it's getting. And oh, by the way, I can take this and tie this back, right, to some type of financial savings within the company.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah, and
I
you
think that's
can't do
so
that
powerful.
with the COE at the moment. You can't take that back to this is how many hours it saved. That review process. Yes, absolutely. Sorry, lad, you were saying.
To Ken's point, if you had had this conversation 2 years ago, well, I want to go spend X million dollars to go hire a bunch of people to do a COE, it wouldn't have flown, right? But now people see the value, they see the huge growth and explosion of apps, and if we want to be digital as a company, we know that O365 and the Power Platform has to be a part of that, along with Power BI, right? So it has to be a part of that. So we have to enable it. How do you enable it, right? You got to spend some money building a COE around it. I will say, though, that major headwind, and I'm sure if you guys were on the cab last week, I apologize for my frustration that came out, but the changes in licensing is just killing me, right? Because for us, you have thousands of users, flipping a switch from, to $40 per user per month, that's millions of dollars of a hit, and it's just not going to run. And I think that's the flip side frustration is, we have this momentum, we have ROI. In fact, I'm writing a white paper with Ken and these guys around the case for Power Apps, right? And how do you do a COE? And it just really got complicated. So I think for what I love to have earlier on is some stability on licensing. Just, my gosh, what's going to be the plan?
Because that all you can eat canvas apps thing, man. I keep saying, like, that's got to be what comes back, because that was what was what was attractive about it, and everyone was heading that way.
Yep.
And you've taken it away because you wanted to give everyone a model-driven app and a portal, and it was like, what was that all about? It just doesn't make any sense to me.
Yeah, we talked during cab, and it was like, you could tell they had the plan already set. They were going to deploy it, and here you go, right? So anyway.
So I'm not going to get on my licensing horse, right? Because and then we don't have that kind of time. But there is one other thing that I would definitely say, toolkit wise, right, that I would think that would benefit the entire community, right? And I've been going through and really acclimating myself and getting the team kind of acclimated, my team, up to the speed in PowerShell for Power Apps and Flow. And what I've noticed is, granted, they did finally provide us, commandlets, right? But the commandlets that they provided, some of them, right, require like GUIDs and a whole bunch of other things, right? So I have to write, the way I like to do things, right, is I will go out and I will write a script, right, so that my team doesn't have to go in and figure all this stuff out, right? I don't want them to have to go look up the GUID of Lad Lear from Azure AD, right, and do all these things. So I write now these really crazy elaborate scripts, right, to make like the most simplest change, right? Like change a user from take Antoine's Power App and assign it to Keith. Done. That's all I want to do, right? I don't want that to be, 5 lines, 10 lines of code, or anything like that, or PowerShell. I just want that just to be done, right? So simplification of the administrative tools, right? I know that's a selfish thing for me, right? I'm saying that because, you know, my team is small and we try to be efficient.
Yeah.
But even if you're the size of Schlumberger, or you're the size of, you know, just a small, say, you know, business, 25 users, mom and pop shop, and you're having someone that's trying to create innovation, right? They don't want to spend time trying to administer, right, their applications by learning this whole new skill set,
Yeah.
right?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Makes
100%,
sense.
man.
So we, oh shoot, we have one more question. Oh, there we go. I'm sorry.
Why not skip it?
I thought I was muted. We do have we have one more question, and that was from Chrissy. And Chris, if you can mute your mic and ask your question if you feel as though you would like to, or I can take it.
Yes. Yeah, go ahead. Just
Okay, sorry about that. It just that usually my voice over the mic may sound like I'm a mouse, but I'm not a mouse.
We love you still.
Okay, thank you again, Ken, or AKA Dr. No, for sharing your information. I just did have, just remember in the beginning when you shared the stats of the explosion of the usage, both with the Power Apps and the flow and everything. Specifically, more with the Power Apps, I'm curious about. Has there been a segment where there's been an increase of the Power Apps that leverage the external usage and sharing? And if so, has that impacted how you treat the security management?
So interestingly enough, I have blocked that, right, internally. And what you're seeing is all internal right now, right? Now, that being said, there are several business units today that are asking for external Power Apps to be turned on, right? So we are looking at and thinking about, right, how do we best go about that, right? I'm a little fuzzy on the licensing side of things about how we're kind of, you know, going to do that, right? And Pratap, I know you're on the phone. I'm not trying to put you on the spot. I'll circle back with you guys later, so don't answer the question, right? But you know, there was some discussion around, you know, licensing and how we were going to do these types of things. Like, for example, if you know, Keith's company has a license for Power Apps, why does he still need to come back and pay for a license inside of our tenant to consume, right, what we're publishing to him, right?
Sure.
Those types of things, right? And from that standpoint, right, when I go to, say, like the local user groups right here in Houston or Austin or somewhere like that, those licensing questions keep popping back up over and over and over again, right? And you know, I know Microsoft is doing what they can, and they're trying to you know, come up with a delicate balance here in terms of the licensing, right? And I definitely applaud them for that. I know it is not an easy job, right? They are in a little bit of a reactive state, as you can see, because they've already, from the announcement that Charles made, right, they've already made changes to the licensing model, right? So I don't know what the future holds for us. I just hope that they keep listening to the community and that they, you know, reason with us and maybe come up with a solution that we've sort of asked for, right? I mean, maybe something like what you said, right? Keep the kind of all you can eat Canvas apps, right? Or something to that effect.
Yeah, man. No, I mean, that's what I hear all, you know, over and over again, is that sort of like, but then I think there's also an argument for how many Canvas apps does a user need, and is more than too many. So I think there's a whole range of discussions there to have, and I'm not sure which is the right way forward, but I did like the cheaper model. It was certainly easier to sell. It was certainly easier to sell. But you know, look, at the end of the day, it's happening at the beginning of the bell curve. I'm sure the new customers, and from what I can understand, talking to people at the World Tour the other day, there were certainly new customers that they were selling to who were kind of like, okay, it costs this, next.
Yeah.
That was very much their approach. I mean, I think when you look at the scales of your company and my company, I mean, we're sort of half the size in terms of number of whatever, but it's a lot. and to justify a lot, you have to have those numbers, and you have to have that those metrics that you're asking for how many hours it's saved, and how many droplets of oil you've managed to push through more than you did yesterday. So I think that's a really interesting thing for us guys to go and take away and potentially build some sort of little governance thing that you launch at the beginning and says, look, what does it look like now, flag in the ground, and in a month's time, what does it look like? And then when you've got 50 mil, what does it look like then? And then you've got that bit that says, look, this is one power app that saved us X hundred or X hundreds of thousands of pounds. We've got 7,500 of them, and there's getting more and more and more. And how many are there of them? And maybe this is a no-brainer. Maybe this is like the safety hat on the oil rig or the safety shoes in the bus garage. It's an essential part of business, and we need to have it turned on. So I think that's the bit where we need to get to. It's just proving the value prop, really. It's not so much how it costs. It's much more about actually going to business and saying, we need this amount of money. Well, listen, thank you very much for coming on. Thank you, Kendrick. Thank you, Clarissa. Thank you, Lad. Thank you to everybody who joined in. We're back next month. Tell us if you want more of these. Tell us if you want less of them. Tell if you hear you hate the sound of our voice and you want us to go away, or you want to have these every week. I can tell you that we were absolutely inundated at the World Tour with people wanting to come on the show, and that was just the London one. I got to say the explosion that we're seeing and the 700% growth in the Power Platform that Microsoft were quoting at the World Tour, it can only be down to the people who are on this call and who will watch this over the coming weeks. It is all about what we do in the next couple of months and then the next year that will really define what happens with our community. Big shout out to the hackathon this weekend. There's a huge TDG hack happening, the global hack for good. It should be interesting. I believe the topic is education, although I don't know how fit we will be to answer any questions at the end of it. No doubt there will be prolific amounts of drinking, swearing, and God knows what else. But it'll be a lot of fun.
Yeah, there are like about 20 countries participating and about 400 participants. So cheer for your countries on Saturday. It's going to run throughout the day.
Nice. And the Flow conference, Flow online conference next week on 10th September. So have a look at that as well. All right,
Lots
guys.
of stuff happening, man. Lots of stuff happening. And it's all new, the all new Power Platform world.
Yep.
It's still happening. Well, thanks very much, and see you next month.
Yep. Thank you, everybody.
All right.
Thank you, guys.
Bye.